Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Standing Committee on Economic Development. My name is Candy Merrill Callison, the chair of this committee. And to my right, we have Councilor Pasillo, who is from District 1. We also have with us this evening Peter Dunn, who is the Chief Development Officer for the city. And we also have Jeanette Toza, who is Housing and Neighborhood Development. We also have Councilor Atel Hajai from District 5, who is with us this evening. Mr. Pottle, would you be kind enough to read 1A?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, in order to ensure public active engagement, the City of Worcester currently allows for both in-person and remote participation at all of its meetings. To partake in the meeting, you can either come to the location or join via Zoom. The phone number for tonight is 1-646-828-7666, and the access code is 160-382-3487. There's also a link to Zoom that is listed under the new Granicus agendas portal on this agenda. Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, and I should just quickly actually add, if you do want to speak during a portion of the meeting, we do ask that you use the raise hand function. If you're using the app, it's in the bottom center of your app. And if you're using a phone, it's by dialing *9. And again, that's if it's the item that you want to speak on. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2A, order that the City Council Standing Committee of Economic Development hereby approves the minutes of the Economic Development Committee meeting on June 3rd, 2025.
Councilors Pasillo?
Yes.
Toomey, and Chairperson Councilor Merrill Carlson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 3A, zoning hearing items. Report of the Planning Board upon the petition of Mark A. Borenstein, request zoning map of the City of Worcester be amended as referenced in Article 3, Section 2 of the City of Worcester zoning ordinance by changing the zoning designation of the property located at and known as 2, 4, 6, and 8 West Oberlin Street and 437, 439 Park Ave from current split zoning designation of Business General 3 and Residence General RG5 to Business General BG3 and Commercial Corridors Overlay District elsewhere CCOD E by extending the Business General BG3 to encompass all of 8 West Oberlin Street and establishing the Commercial Corridors Overlay District elsewhere, CCOD-E at the property as shown on the plan attached here too. On that item, Mr. Borenstein, please state your name and city of residence.
Yes. For the record, Madam Chair, Mark Borenstein, I'm attorney at the law firm of Prince LaBelle here in Worcester, also a proud resident of the City of Worcester. This evening I'm joined by Anthony Abdulki, who is one of the representatives of the ownership of the property. We have a short video, if the chair would allow, that Mr. Pottle has available. It just provides an overview of the application.
Sure. Mr. Pottle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll bring it up right now.
And before we start, just want to recognize Alex Kalkunis, who is the city solicitor. Welcome. And Councilor Toomey, to my left, City Councilor at Large, also has joined us. Thank you.
Don't hear any sound, AJ. There should be music in the beginning. That's how you know the sound's working. That might get really loud now. Nope, no sound.
I'm not sure. I'll look to cable services. Do we have any way to get the sound up? I have it turned on the TV and on my computer. Madam Chair, I'm not sure, I apologize, but the volume doesn't appear like it's going to work.
All right. We'll do the old-fashioned way. Maybe just run through the video, AJ, and I'll just narrate it.
Okay.
There's narration during the video. But in essence, Madam Chair and members of the committee, we're seeking to rezone the property as you indicated in the legal advertisement that you referenced, to provide opportunities to redevelop the property, to provide a mixed-use development. The property is currently split zone BG3 and RG5. We're seeking to extend the BG3, as you can see there, to encompass the entire property and establish the CCOD at the property. It's interesting to me that the CCOD doesn't exist on Park Ave. It's the commercial corridor overlay. One thinks of Park Ave as a CCOD. So this is kind of an exciting opportunity to establish the CCOD on Park Ave. The applicant is proposing a 6-story mixed-use building, ground floor retail, approximately 40 units. There will be surface parking in the rear and landscaping. Obviously, this actual project would require planning board approval, but we do require the zoning amendment to facilitate this mixed-use development. So with that, I would also note that the proposed zoning amendment, as provided in the staff memo, is consistent with the Worcester Now Next plan, which would provide mixed-use opportunities close to public transportation, which there's ample public transportation on Park Ave. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that the committee may have.
Question, Mr. Borenstein, how many affordable units in this particular?
So the development itself would comply with the inclusionary zoning ordinance. So we haven't identified that yet, but given that it's a new development, it would be subject to the inclusionary zoning ordinance. So as the chair knows, it's 15% at 80% AMI or 10% at 60% AMI or a fee in lieu.
Okay. And are there any ADA units in this particular?
We haven't gotten to that stage yet. This is very preliminary. As I said before, the zoning amendment has to take effect before we can go through the formal permitting process and the design process.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Dunn, do you have any comment on this particular item?
Sure, Madam Chair. Just for the record, the Planning Board heard this item on February 25th of 2025, and they unanimously recommended approval of this 4-0.
Thank you. Councilor Toomey, do you have any questions or comments on?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I'm just wondering what the setback is from, is it right on the sidewalk?
It likely will be on the sidewalk. That's usually recommended in the CCOD because it provides an active streetscape.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Toomey. Councilor Priscilla?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this particular item? Seeing none? Oh, maybe we have one.
Good afternoon. My name is Ted Costas, and this is an item that I could support in our district. It's well much needed.
And could you please, for the public record, state your residence?
My residence is Worcester.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pottle, is there anyone on the line who would like to speak on this item?
Madam Chair, no one is raising their hand at this time.
My recommendation would be to approve this item. Roll call.
Councilors Pasillo,
Yes.
Toomey,
Yes.
and Chairperson Councilor Merrill Carlson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are moving on to 3B, but I'm also going to take 4A at the same time. 3B, report of the planning board upon the petition of Joseph, and help me with this last name. Mangiamanelli requests residents be allowed to raise chickens for the sole purpose of laying eggs. And 4A, under miscellaneous item, petition of Evan Corrigan requests the creation of permitting process to allow for residents to have chicken hens. Just want to state for the record before we move on here for full transparency. We have back in 2021 from the zone ordinance amendment from the Stephen Raleigh at the time, Assistant Chief Development Officer. This is a document the planning board was referred a resident submitted petition to amend the City of Worcester zone ordinance to modify the zone ordinance to allow the keeping egg-laying chicken poultry in RS7 resident single-family zoning districts. Having considered the petition at a remote public hearing on January 20th, 2021, on February 10th, 2021, the planning board voted 4-0 with Molinari absent to recommend denial of the amendment as proposed. However, the board clarified that its recommendation to deny is based on the proposal not being sufficiently developed or detailed to recommend, rather than reflecting a consensus position on the keeping of chickens in general. In its deliberation, the board expressed its openness to consider subsequent zoning proposals regarding chicken keeping, provide that such proposals include well-developed controls that may be needed to ensure animal and human health and safety, prevent nuisances, and to ensure capacity and processes for enforcement. Again, that was on February 12th, 2021. On June 30th, 2022, the planning board was referenced a residential submitted petition to ask the city council to consider crafting an ordinance to allow chickens in residential communities. Having considered the petition at a hybrid public hearing on June 8th, 2022, the planning board, finding that the petition was not properly before the board, voted 3-0 with King absent to refer the petition back to City Council with the strong recommendation that the council request the administration develop an ordinance to allow for the keeping of chickens within the city. In its deliberation, the board expressed their enthusiastic support for allowing chickens with appropriate regulatory controls for related potential nuisances, and suggested that the ordinance of communities that do allow chickens, such as Somerville and Brockton, be reviewed as models for Worcester. And then in 2025, we also have, on February 25th, 2025, the planning board was referenced the petition to amend the City of Worcester zone ordinance to create provisions to allow residents to apply for a special permit with the planning board or zoning board of appeals to raise chickens for the sole purpose of laying eggs on a case-by-case basis. Having considered the petition at a hybrid public hearing on April 9th, 2025, the planning board, finding that the petition was not properly before the board, voted 3-0 with King absent to refer the petition back to the City Council with the strong recommendation that the council direct the administration to develop an ordinance to allow for the keeping of chickens within the city. In its deliberation, the board expressed their enthusiastic support for allowing chickens with appropriate regulatory controls to mitigate against potential related nuisance. Mr. Dunn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you described this, there is some history with this, recent history with this topic in the city and with the planning board. The planning board, as indicated, has been pro-chickens, and they have had a variety of petitions that they've reviewed over the last 4 years or so. In many cases, because there isn't a specific zoning ordinance amendment for them to be reviewing the provisions of some of the details around those regulatory controls, setbacks, things that will help maintain animal and human health and safety. They haven't necessarily been properly in front of them, but they've provided these reports back to the council and to this committee in those two most recent examples, 2022 and now this year, indicating their support for it generally, but to have the council direct the administration to provide more information or recommended ordinance on what that would look like. In particular, the one from 2022 did come to the Economic Development Committee, and of course it was a different committee makeup at the time. They did have a hearing in, let's see, I believe it was in October of 2022, when there were some orders that came out of that committee for the administration, one of which was for the city manager to work with the city solicitor, the Board of Health, Commissioner of Inspectional Services, and Police Chief to provide City Council with a report concerning how chicken ordinances have been established in other gateway cities in Massachusetts. Another order that the city manager be requested to provide City Council with a report concerning insights from municipalities who have crafted and approved chicken ordinances as to whether there have been any residual issues or challenges with said ordinances. And then a third one, that the city manager be requested to create a working group or task force to explore the possibility of crafting a draft ordinance to enable residents to keep and raise chickens. Throughout each of these instances, whether it was in 2022, previously in 2021, and now this year, there have been many public participation at those public hearings, both for people that are enthusiastically in support of it, as well as some folks that have concerns, mostly around those issues related to rodents or predators or other health concerns, which is why I think you hear in those various reports from Planning Board to be thinking about appropriate regulatory controls and mitigating against related nuisances. To my knowledge, those orders that came from Economic Development Committee back in 2022 did not have a subsequent report from the administration. And then I believe as that session ended, that item that was held in committee then procedurally expired, I guess I would say. The clerk could clarify on that. So this is why I think it's been revived again to have that consideration. So happy to have kind of some discussion with the committee members and where the committee would like to take this with the council after the committee. And my personal suggestion is that it might make sense to revive those requests, have the Economic Development Office work with the city solicitor, the law department, as well as inspectional services to come back with a report with that information that has been previously requested about what other communities have these ordinances, what has been their experience with it, have there been challenges around enforcement or nuisances, what are some of those regulatory controls that make sense, and then have that full kind of information for the council to consider as the discussion progresses. I do know our new Commissioner of Inspectional Services was previously in Somerville, so I think he might have some great insight to offer from his experience in Somerville. As was referenced, they do have one of these ordinances that enable residents to keep chickens. We do have, I did want to also just hand out, we had a couple of emails submitted to the development office over the last couple of days. Both of them were with regard to concerns around it. So I'll hand that out for the record. If it's appropriate or necessary, I can certainly read them. They're a little lengthy, but I'll give a copy of each of those emails to the committee members and to the clerk. And then the other thing that I just wanted to clarify too, you might notice that you were taking these two items collectively, and just for clarification, as they appear differently on the agenda, there was the petition of Evan Corrigan requesting the creation of a permitting process to allow for chickens. The reason that doesn't have like a report attached to it from the planning board is when that petition was before the council, it was immediately sent to this committee versus the more recent petition from Mr. Mangiamelli that did get referred to the planning board. So that's why you have the report of the planning board attached to that petition. But the two petitions are obviously related to the same topic, so it makes sense to take them collectively.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this item? If you'd like to speak on the item, please come forward and state your name and city of residence.
Hello again, my name is Ted Costas. Worcester is my residence. Just want to show you two pictures, first of all, if I may. This is a picture of people that don't follow anything on my front porch. This is the chicken coop next to my house in the backyard. Now, it took me quite a few phone calls to get that straightened out. Apparently, the landlord it was terrible. And no offense to chickens, you know, it's just that I live in the middle of 3-deckers. Very close-knit, and not much privacy as it is. I don't think this would be something that I could support in my neighborhood and probably many of the other neighborhoods here in the city. So who's going to regulate this? Who's going to inspect it? I mean, we can't even get inspectional services to come out for many reasons. So it's going to be hard. And I have no offense against, you know, nothing personal about chickens or anything like that, but it's just, I don't feel that it's comfortable for anyone to have to put through those type of matters. Now, you know, the CDC doesn't even recommend it. They reported numerous salmonella outbreaks in various states, linking back to backyard poultry, such close interaction with a variety of animals can potentially lead to zoonotic diseases. We also have a rat issue here in the city. They like to eat. They'll eat anything. They'll eat feed. They'll come in. They'll come around. We already have that situation in my neighborhood and many other neighborhoods in you know, throughout the city. So that's just asking for more issues. Again, you know, I don't mind the idea, but I don't understand how it can be regulated and who's going to do the inspections and how often. And of course, you know, folks just might get tired of it after a while because it is a lot of work and there, you know, there'll be some neglect. So I would say if you're going to look into something like this, do a little more of the research as far as acreage between each home, maybe more open lots that, you know, where they can do this. So I'm not saying out in the outskirts of the city, but there are areas in the city where this can be done. But I think this is something that's going to have to be scrutinized a little bit better than just, you know, giving out permits for chicken coops. And I do apologize to anyone, you know, who's here for that matter, but it has to be taken seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this item? Mr. Pottle, is there anyone online who would like to speak on the item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we have the person raising their hand, Joseph Mangiamelli, I believe the petitioner.
Yep.
Just sent a request for Joseph to unmute.
Okay, greetings to all of you. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
All right, thank you. So yes, I'm the one who has the most latest iteration of this that's come up recently. I'd like to share with you 6 things that I've noted down here as necessary for us as we think about chickens. 1 would be a permitting process where a person has to pay a certain fee to have a permit to raise chickens for the purpose of laying eggs only. Number 2, it would be single-family dwellings only that could be allowed to have a permit to do so. Number 3, there would be no roosters allowed in any situation that would have chickens present. Number 4, there would be a 6 chicken maximum. You need to have at least 2 chickens, in order to have eggs, so 6 maximum. And then number 5, people who are committed to this process would need to show some sort of design for how they plan to do this, that they could present to a board, the planning board or someone. It's not hard. There are many great coop designs online that a person can find quite easily. And last but not least, there has to be a commitment to the proper handling of waste. And I would like to propose that we be allowed to use the yellow bags for Worcester trash as something we could put waste in so that it could be properly disposed versus staying, in a other kind of setting. I already use yellow bags for my waste in my current situation. Prior to coming to Worcester, I did have chickens. And yes, you do have issues that chickens will cause, but I don't believe we're going to see a huge number of people clamoring to raise chickens because there is a cost involved. And if you're going to do it right, you have to be committed to the process. So I do think it can really take place and it can be done well. It just takes commitment from the people who really want to raise chickens for this purpose. It's not a financial thing. I'm probably not going to break even financially for quite a while, but I love managing my own property. I have gardens, I have trees for fruit, I have other things on my property, and I would really like to have chickens as well. And that's currently where I live right now, so I'm in a single family dwelling. So anyway, that's my summary of the 6 things I really wanted to share with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is the only person that was raising their hand.
Counselor Toomey, any comments, questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is probably been one of the most debated issues on this council for a long period of time. I think, who doesn't love chickens? I love to watch them. They're cute when they're babies, right? Who doesn't love to eat chicken? Chicken parm, chicken cacciatore, all sorts of good food, right? I love eggs. We all love eggs. And I think that it would warrant us being judicious to really take an intense look at how it's working in other urban centers. And I think that making sure that we ask all the right questions is important. I do want to mention that there's a concern that I have that sometimes, people are talking about how it would help limit people's food bills if they had chickens and they'd be able to be more sustainable and all of that. And as you heard, that there was an issue with with cost. It's not cheap to do it properly. And so I do have a concern that, this limits people if they don't have funds or if they don't live in a single-family home with enough land. It's difficult. The other thing is, for the oversight, and I mean, we know that we have chickens in the city. They may be invisible to some, but we know that they're there. What are we doing about that? Are we able to even address that? So I think there's there's pros and there's cons on both sides, and I think that it would be warrant doing a really intense report coming back. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Basilio?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Counselor Toomey. I think it would be great to have some more information. I would love to know how many people in Somerville have chickens and how many applied for it. I definitely appreciate and understand the concerns. We've been getting a lot of emails. When I ran for office, I supported chickens, and I have continuously said I do support chickens in the city, but I want to make it clear that you do need regulatory controls, a permitting process, and I really liked Mr. Mangiamelli's ideas. I think it would be great to start it with single family only and see how that works, kind of start small. And it's positive that the new commissioner is from Somerville, so I'm sure that he does have some good insights. You know, I always say this, but my kids go to farm school and they have chickens, and it really is a great thing. It's not about necessarily saving money on eggs, but you know where your eggs are coming from, and it's sustainable. And I think if it's done right, this could work. So I would love to learn more about how other communities are doing it and how the city could make it work. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Councilor Hygiai?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one suggestion, if I may. The original petitioner, Amanda Shearstone, who did an incredible amount of work on this, had submitted to former chairman of the ED committee 2 model ordinances in her communications, and she had copied me in those. I'm happy to, if you don't have those available, happy to either contact the resident. But I would suggest, if you haven't, I would suggest that we take a look at that. She did go as far as calling inspectional services in 2 communities, Somerville, and I can't remember which other one, to ask about how they're handling complaints. And so she provided some thorough research that I think would be helpful to have entered into the record. And lastly, I do want to say that I am also committed to seeing this through. Agree with Councilor Pasillo that we do need some strict regulations and education, and I think with the proper parameters in place, we can, hopefully the City Council can see this through and approve it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So, I believe the recommendation at this point for these items would be for us to come back with a report. Mr. Dunn, if you could have those conversations with the solicitor as well as with the new commissioner from Inspectional Services, and I guess I need to ask, you mentioned the police department. I'm just a little fuzzy on why the police department. And I may be naive here, but I'm just trying to
Yeah, sure.
understand why the police.
Madam Chair, that was not necessarily my recommendation. That was how the order was crafted from ED committee in 2022. I forget at the time, like, why they were suggested to contribute. I do think my instinct is the most relevant would be economic development from the zoning perspective, the law department, inspectional services, potentially health and human services as well. But I'm not really sure that police would have a direct role on it.
Right, that, excuse me, that I understand. I don't have any, any objection. It was just more of a question, and maybe the solicitor might have an answer for that. So I guess, as Councilor Toomey just said, animal control falls under, makes sense now, okay. So obviously we should make sure that the conversation is also had with the Worcester Police Department, specifically animal control. So that would be my recommendation. Is there anything, Mr. Dunn, that you believe that I missed on? And certainly, I believe you have a copy of the ordinance. Is that correct, from back when Councilor Rose was chair of ED? Did they not send in?
Yes, as Councilor Haji mentioned, Ms. Shearstone had some examples. It's similar to what Mr. Mangiamelli was describing, just some recommendations around some of those regulatory controls. One thing that seems to be a best practice that's brought up a lot, and it was consistent with Ms. Shearstone and Mr. Mangiamelli, was no more than 6 hens, no roosters. In Ms. Shearstone, she suggested an accessory use, seemed like more of a by right option versus Mr. Mangiamelli was suggesting a special permit. And Ms. Shearstone's recommendation was accessory use for residential properties with 3 or fewer dwelling units. So there are different, schools of thought about those provisions or those dimensional kind of controls. So I think it makes sense for us to kind of look at what are the other municipalities in Massachusetts doing, what are kind of those ranges of what those municipalities have, what are some of the best practices. I know some universities have come up with some literature around best practices as well, so I think this report would really center on some of that research of other ordinances that exist and kind of giving the council an idea of what are those ranges around those types of dimensional controls.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Pottle, is there anything we need to do with this at this point? Then this item would be held, is that correct? Pending the report to come back?
Madam Chair, I think that would be an appropriate action to have a chairman's order go forward relative to the administration deliberating and providing that report back to you. And in the meantime, you would be more than welcome to hold these items if you felt that was most appropriate.
And then the follow-up question is, given the fact that 3B is asking for what 4A is, should we file 4A?
Madam Chair, there would be logic to that, so that you only have the one. Obviously, the petition from Mr. Corrigan came after the
Correct.
original petition, not the original petition, but the more recent petition from Joseph Mangiamelli. So it went to committee just to kind of accelerate the conversation, if you will.
Okay.
So you could certainly place that on file and hold the report from the planning board.
Okay, so my recommendation would be to hold item 3B.
Councilors Pasillo,
Yes.
Toomey,
Yes,
and Chairperson Councilor Merrill Carlson.
Yes. And my recommendation is to file 4A.
Councilors Pasillo,
Yes.
Toomey,
yes,
and Chairperson Councilor Merrill Carlson.
Yes. Okay. Moving on to item 5A, communications of the city manager. Communication of the city manager recommended adoption of the FY 2026 through FY 2030 housing production plan. Mr. Dunn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had previously provided the committee and the council a copy of the draft housing production plan that was transmitted to the planning board as kind of an early preview of what we were sharing with the planning board. Since that time, the planning board did review that draft, and there were some suggested modifications that are outlined in our memo here that I can go through. But ultimately, they recommended to adopt it as amended. And so this is coming back to the council and this committee because under the state guidelines that we're operating with housing production plans, it's not just an adoption of the planning board, it's also an adoption of the city council. So you have seen much of this previously in committee, and I'll just kind of highlight the some of the things that came out of the planning board hearing. Some revisions include just some tweaking around one of the strategies related to planning staff capacity. So the original strategy, the way it was phrased, was to study the planning staff capacity in peer cities of similar sizes and to increase staffing to boost capacity for program implementation. And their revised language, I think, and Ms. Tozer could certainly comment more. I wasn't at the planning board hearing, but my instinct is that they concluded that an increase in staff capacity was necessary. So rather than studying it, the revised strategy language is to simply increase planning staffing to boost capacity for proposed policy implementation. One thing I would note, as the committee and council is aware of, in the FY26 budget proposal that was supported by council, we did have a new position in planning that was approved, and that position is dedicated to long-range planning. So, of course, we have a high volume of transactions that happen in the planning department every day, supporting the work of the boards and commissions that they staff, and sometimes it's hard to have that additional time and capacity necessary to focus on some of the longer term strategies and planning efforts, and so this position will be dedicated to that. So that's appreciated, both the city manager and city council's support of that new position. And then their other suggestion was to add 3 new strategies, so I can go through those. The first is to establish an understanding of vacant rental housing in Worcester by conducting an analysis of data collected through the rental registry, such as vacancy rates, unit types, and geographic distribution, and then use this data to identify trends, inform policy decisions, and target strategies to increase housing availability and occupancy. I know the council has talked about that before, along with the administration, is we need as many units as we can get right now to address the shortage and the housing needs that we face as a community. So when we have units that are going unused and vacant, that's not helping. So how do we unlock those vacancies into new housing opportunities that are, of course, at a lower cost kind of scenario than trying to build new? The second new strategy that was recommended through the planning board process was to strengthen the municipality's capacity to provide affordable housing monitoring and compliance oversight, as well as technical support to property owners with deed-restricted units. So through some of our initiatives like inclusionary zoning, as well as some of the funding that has been more, I guess, widely accessible through the American Rescue Plan Act, and moving forward with our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, there are more owners that might have deed restricted, and we foresee more owners that could have deed restricted units beyond just the traditional larger scale affordable housing developers. So making sure that we have that technical support for the smaller owners to understand what those deed restrictions mean, the process to make sure that those units, when they come available, are maintaining compliance when those units turn over, and then just the sheer volume of having hopefully more deed restricted units in the city. We'll just have to do more of that monitoring. So every year, making sure that they're in compliance, and then certainly when those units turn over. We have been working on that. I know that this context for this was a resident was asking about, what are those processes right now? How are we ensuring the existing affordable rental units are remaining truly affordable over time? We do have a position in our housing division that is dedicated to that monitoring. So I think some of this, it's certainly worthwhile to include and make sure that we're validating that and emphasizing that, but just as I oversee the department, I don't think that we have a specific staffing resource challenge right now related to that, but as the portfolio of deed restricted units grows over time, we will certainly evaluate that and keep an eye on that. And then the third strategy that was recommended to be added was to enhance referrals to community partners such as the Central West Justice Center for Housing Stability and Fair Housing Services to prevent displacement. So those are the highlights in terms of what has been sort of modified or revised since the committee looked at the revised draft at the time that we submitted it to the planning board. And I want to recognize Ms. Tozer really shepherded this whole process along from the beginning. It started with a grant application to the Commonwealth through the Housing Choice Initiative. We are a housing choice. We have a housing choice community designation, which thankfully was recently renewed, again, through the work of Ms. Tozer, so we're happy about that. And with that designation, you can unlock access to various resources that are available through the Commonwealth. And so we were able to get a grant that supported the cost related to the consultant that helped prepare this housing production plan. And then broadly speaking, having the housing production plan as well adopted is one of those other, important things that we can check as it relates to competitiveness for state and federal resources. The state really wants to make sure that in addition to MBTA communities compliance, which we'll talk a little bit about later on the agenda, having housing production plan, really spending the time to be thoughtful about strategies to address your housing needs as a community is something that they look for. And so when there are competitive resources as we submit various grant applications, it's helpful to be able to say we do have a housing production plan as a community and that we're working on the various strategies that are recommended in those plans. So that's kind of the overview and the highlight, but I'll turn it over to Ms. Tozer if she has anything else that she'd like to add, and we're obviously both available for any questions.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't have much to add to that. That was a great overview. I will clarify just one very minor point in the strategy around understanding vacant rental housing in the city. That will be using data that's collected through the city's new property data platform, not just the rental registry that has been brought up before. So I just want to clarify that's not just rental registry data. It's data that's collected.
Can I stop you there, because I'm really glad to hear that, because I think the rental registry is a great thing once we get to a point where we can actually use that data, but I'm a little fearful of that's a ways out. So I'm happy to hear that there's another mechanism for us to collect that data, and that's done through whose office?
Sure. So through Inspectional Services, the city has adopted a new platform called Ptolemy Building Blocks, and that brings together data that's collected through Inspectional Services staff, through fire, police, and kind of coalesces all of that data into one place, which will help identify some of the trends that we're trying to understand for vacancy.
Thank you. Counselor Toomey, any questions or comments?
Thank you very much. I know there's quite a bit in here, and I appreciate all of the effort that went into it. I was just looking at one of the maps, and I'm wondering, I think it was the map with the schools. That was, yeah, here it is, page 140. And I'm looking at where the schools are supposed to be, and I'm not seeing any over off of Grafton Street, on Grafton Street. And I'm wondering how accurate this is. You know, Roosevelt's not there.
So,
Yeah, through
Mr. Dunn.
through the chair to the council, I believe it's this kind of collection of 4 dots here. There's 2 greens, 1 red, and 1 blue. It's kind of just, you can kind of see the map. Obviously, it's hard because it's like zoomed out so far, but you can kind of see Sunderland Road on it.
I
And it's
see.
just left of Sunderland Road. That would be the Grafton Street corridor there. So I assume that would be, Rice Square School, Roosevelt, East Middle. So those should be what those 4 dots are representing, I believe.
Okay, oh, I see what they did. They overlaid the streets over the dot. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Priscillo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for your hard work. This is a really great report. The Build-A-Better triple-decker competition is really interesting, and I read about it, but would you mind speaking to it a little bit so the public can understand too?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. So this recommendation really emerged through the steering committee that convened to help shepherd the creation of this plan. There is an architect who was on the steering committee, and he is the one that really thought that this would be a helpful kind of tool for the creation of affordable housing, not just creating affordable housing, but making affordable housing that is desirable and fits the context of Worcester, since we are a city of 3-deckers. And it has been done in other communities. I believe, I don't have the recommendation, but it has been done in Massachusetts. And so kind of looking to not replicate, but adopt a similar competition.
That's great. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to speak on this particular item? Please come to the microphone and state your name and city of residence, please.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Will Talbot, and I'm a Worcester resident of District 5 and part of the leadership team of Strong Towns Worcester. This afternoon, I'm here in support of item 5A to recommend the Worcester Housing Production Plan for adoption by the full City Council. This plan can serve as a roadmap for the promotion and implementation of affordable and incremental housing in the city over the next 5 years. It also includes actionable strategies to alleviate the city's urgent housing affordability crisis, support residents of the city who are experiencing housing insecurity or being unhoused, and revitalizing older housing units in the city so that they can be safer and more sustainable. 2 housing strategies from the Housing Production Plan's action matrix, which I think are especially innovative, are the aforementioned Build a Better Triple-Decker competition, and as well as creating a menu of pre-approved housing types that are economically feasible and can be built with minimal permitting approvals. As a resident of a triple-decker who enjoys living in this style of housing but knows that recently this housing has been difficult to build in the city and that existing triple-deckers are often in need of upgrades, the competition would be a great way to energize different members of the community on creating more of this type of housing that can enhance affordability in the city. And also, the zoning changes recommended in the plan can help out with building those triple-deckers. Having a menu of pre-approved housing types would also assist in a creation of network of upstart incremental developers and can boost economic opportunity and affordable housing in the city. In conclusion, I urge the community to pass item 5A to support efforts to promote affordable and incremental housing in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fred Nathan Worcester. So obviously we're talking on 5A, but I'm taking this whole thing in a totally different slant. So I hope you'll pick up on it. As I've brought to here the city council, I brought to the council, brought it to the zoning, brought it to the housing, other meetings, and talking about the housing. So I know Peter Dunn can't answer this right now, but I understand that the city of Worcester is going around with inspectors trying to figure out, because I brought it to your attention, there are as many as 5% of the total units in Worcester are empty on purpose. They're not empty because they can't get the rent. They're empty because the people don't want to rent to people and then have it cost them $20,000 to get rid of that person. So you can spend all the money bringing in new housing, but that takes time. No matter how you look at it, it takes time. These are things you cannot, I mean, if they had a housing development in every district in Worcester, there would still be issues. And these issues are complicated issues. Obviously, part of the problem is, and you can't fault people for this, the people who live in Boston, who live now here in Worcester, and they rent an apartment that might cost them $2,500, they're ecstatic if they only have to pay $2,500 because they were used to paying $5,000 for a lot less space. So you can talk about housing all you want. You can build a skyscraper here in Worcester, and it still won't solve the problems of the housing, and especially if there are as many empty units as I've heard from different contractors. You won't find one of those contractors come up here and speak because they would be afraid that you'll try to blackball them. But there are a lot of units, and there are inspectors, I've heard this from multiple people that drive around the city and they look to see if there are curtains or blinds in these different apartments as they're driving by. They do take notice of it. So until you solve the real problem of housing, it's going to get worse.
Thank you. Mr. Pottle, is there anyone online?
Madam Chair, we have one person raising their hand, Robert Bellotta. I just sent the request to unmute.
Sure.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you, Ajay. Yes, just wanted to comment on item 5A. I think it's a really great comprehensive plan. The city has been implementing a lot of these different strategies for some time now, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the rental registry, the inclusionary zoning. I think these are all great tools that we can use to leverage affordability in the city. However, I think it would be great. It's really important that we strive to carve out as much affordable housing per development as we can. Worcester's always been a community that has been affordable for seniors aging in place. for families putting down roots. It's important that we really fight to keep this part of the city's identity, especially with developments that are getting tax breaks. Perfect example, Alta on the Row, where the old, where Mount Carmel was, 371 market rate apartments. The building up on Human Street is going to be around 200 market rate. We should be really trying to carve out affordable units wherever we can. And I know that's something that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund has done a great job with. It would be great to see some of that try to be used through ties and other affordable housing projects. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Hi.
I was a little slow to get in line. My
That's
name's Jacob Seidel. I'm a Worcester resident. I'm also with Strong Towns. Here to support the housing production plan and its adoption because I was very, very heartened to see that it provides a variety of tools and options for people trying to build in Worcester. I think a big part of the issues that we have in producing housing in Worcester is that you can either sort of build a single family or you can be a big developer and build a big building, but there's a lot of options in between that are a little bit more difficult to grasp for people who just want to, you know, build a duplex on their lot. So having these tools available through the housing production plan, I think are going to make it a lot easier for people who live in Worcester, who want to do something, who want to develop some housing, but aren't a developer professionally, to be able to come into City Hall and say, hey, I've got this size of lot, here are its features, what are my options? And to have that array of options already there for them, I think is going to be a really big boost to people being able to produce housing in the city. So that's a huge point that I wanted to point out, and I'm very appreciative of the great work that our city employees have done developing this, and I hope it does lend itself to a big boost in housing production in Worcester in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the three items that they had recommended, I think, are great items that they put forward. We've been looking at this housing production plan for a little bit now here on ED as well as in council. And I do agree, Mr. Dunn and Ms. Tozer, that your office has done an incredible job with this. I mean, we struggle all the time with how many empty apartments do we really have offline, and I don't think that you can take it that because there's no curtains hanging or any blinds hanging anymore today that those apartments are empty. It is the in thing today for no curtains and no blinds. So it's a little hard to say because there's neither of those that those apartments are necessarily empty. I do agree we have empty apartments, and how do we get there to find out where all those are? 2 years ago, there was a number that was used, but nobody ever really verified or solidified that number, that there was in the vicinity of 1,200. But again, that number was never verified if they were empty. I think that we as a city and as elected officials, we just need to continue to use every tool that there is in the toolbox. And I also agree with that we really haven't seen a lot of housing production for what I would call the average everyday citizen who wants to build a house or build a two-family. There's not been a lot of that, and quite honestly, when you talk to people about that, it's really all about the cost of what it is costing for people to do that. But I do like the fact that people will have options to walk in City Hall and find out what their options are for. We do have a tremendous amount of empty lots throughout this city. It would be great if we could see them, that they have houses on them one day. But again, I just want to say to the Economic Development office. I appreciate all the work that you do, and certainly you do a tremendous amount with not a lot of staff. And I think people do recognize that. So my motion would be to approve item 5A.
Councilors Pasillo,
Yes.
Toomey,
Yes.
and Chairperson Councilor Merrill Carlson.
Yes. Item 5B, communication of the city manager transmitting informational communication relative to fiscal year 25 Worcester Arts Council grant making.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is the annual report that we provide to council related to the efforts of the Worcester Arts Council, which they do more than this, but one of their core functions as one of our boards and commissions is to help evaluate grant proposals and develop those priorities and application forms through the funds that we get from the state. So the State Mass Cultural Council gets dollars from the state legislature every year, and then based on a funding formula, they distribute those dollars down to the local level at the local cultural councils. And so that is the Worcester Arts Council for us. And so this is the annual report on their grant making for FY25. They did receive, in addition to the Mass Cultural Council dollars, $10,000 of support from the Greater Worcester Community Foundation as well. And so this process, the total funding was 235. Wait a second, let me see here. Total amount was $235,030. That supported 51 grants as well as 4 fellowships. So they are smaller grants. They're in the $5,000 type range, sometimes even less, depending on the grant proposal, but tend to be at that maximum of $5,000. It is a very competitive program, as it is every year, so we hope to continue to see that support from the state legislature, as well as leverage other resources. Last fiscal year, FY24, I think it was, we were able to leverage some of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars that were dedicated to the creative sector. So to give you a sense, while we were able to support 51 grants this fiscal year, which is huge, that was out of 164 total applications, so less than a third. So we have a full list of those, as well as the 4 fellowships, and happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Pottle, is there anyone online who would like to speak on this particular item?
Not at this time, Madam Chair.
Councilor Toomey,
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Pasillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to thank Mr. Dunn and the Worcester Arts Council and the Cultural Development Office. These grants are really great. I'm happy to see some friends on here. The Joy of Music program is I'm on the board and I take piano lessons there. It's a great group, and it's, you know, $5,000 might not seem like a lot, but it really does mean a lot to artists. And even if it just helps fund transportation for kids to get to the program, it's really helpful. So it's always great to see this list. Thank you.
If there's anyone from the public who would like to speak on this item, please come forward and state your name and city of residence.
Fred Nathan, again, Worcester. I don't quite know if this pertains to this item, but do you include, I don't know if they get funding from you or whether they're completely private, the Arts Start Worcester that they had down Park Ave, they're not doing this year?
Start on the street.
Yes. Is that all part of that, or is this totally independent?
Mr. Dunn, if you could respond to
'Cause
that,
I really
that
don't
would
know.
be terrific.
Sure, through the chair. The Start on the Street Festival has received financial support from the city in the past. They're obviously not included on this. This is for FY25. I'd have to go back and look if they've received Worcester Arts Council funding previously. I do know that they received funds through the dedicated program we had under the American Rescue Plan Act for community and cultural festivals. So I know they received, I think it was $12,500 from that, which was a great program. We're hoping to try to do something like that again in partnership with the Greater Worcester Community Foundation. Obviously, you know, these days it's hard to identify available resources for it, but it was a very successful program. Obviously, we appreciate all of, you know, what comes out of those community and cultural festivals. We do have some examples of that on this list. Not Start on the Street, but Casita Cultura Latina had $5,000 in FY25 for the Dia de los Muertos festival. I believe ACE is on here, right?
ACE is on there, yeah.
With Crocodile River Music. The Worcester Caribbean American Carnival is on here. The Worcester Center for Crafts Annual Arts Festival. So this does go to organizations for those types of programming, also just direct programs and services they offer, as well as some individuals who might be, you know, individual creatives that might be doing something that offers creative expression so that the community can enjoy. So it's not limited to, you know, individual artists or restricted only to organizations. That includes a mix of both. And we do have some of those community and cultural festivals in the mix for FY25.
Thank you. My recommendation would be to approve item 5B.
Councilors Pasillo,
Yes.
Toomey,
Yes.
and Chairperson Councilor Merrill Carlson.
Yes. Item 5C, communication of the city manager transmitting informational communication relative to MBTA communities compliance and economic feasibility analysis for inclusionary zoning. Mr. Dunn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just by way of background and reminder, related to MBTA communities compliance, as they call it. So it's Section 3A of MGL Chapter 40A, which is commonly referred to as the MBTA Communities Law. We had submitted our application for district compliance, which we are, thankfully, compliant. We did not have to make modifications to our existing zoning ordinance. You see that a lot of communities kind of grappling with that, but we have had fairly permissive zoning for multifamily development by right, which is great. One of the things that we did have to supplement that application with, because we have inclusionary zoning that exceeds 10% of the units at 80% AMI, we had to undertake a economic feasibility analysis with a third party to essentially demonstrate that our inclusionary zoning ordinance is not prohibiting or inhibiting the creation of multifamily housing in the city. So we did that in partnership with the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. They were our third party that helped prepare the analysis. Some highlights from that, and no surprise, I know we've talked about this kind of at length. I know we had a report last year about some of the multifamily project proposals that had stalled for one reason or another, primarily economic reasons. And so what the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission did was they went through a variety of models for different housing type scenarios. So as we know, with inclusionary zoning, it applies not just to rental housing, but also for sale condo type developments as well. So they ran a number of models, including, you know, changing different variables like is the total unit count, is it a rental project, is it a for sale project. So I believe they looked at 20 units, 12 units, 25 units, 50 units, 100 units, and 200 units, and then looked at a condo scenario of 20 unit condo scenario. And so there's a lot of numbers associated with that analysis, but I think it's really helpful as we evaluate what the implications are of regulatory policies like inclusionary zoning that obviously creates a limitation on the rent that can be charged on some of the units in a project. So they look at things like important benchmarks around feasibility, including debt service coverage ratios when you're trying to seek financing from a bank to support construction costs. When you look at the equity side of the equation, you know, the investment side of the equation, what is that cash on cash return, or what's the internal rate of return on that investment that comes into a project. And there are certainly benchmarks in the real estate industry, both on a regional basis, as well as a national basis, that they used for those benchmarks. And so one of the conclusions is that for the majority of the housing types analyzed, across different options as well for compliance. So they ran these models, including like the 10% option at 60% AMI, the 15% option at 80% AMI, as well as a payment in lieu scenario, that the majority of these housing types result in financial returns that are below market expectations. That doesn't mean that a project won't move forward. It tends to be a condition that you find in second city type environments like Worcester, where you're not in a major metro area like Boston, that obviously has more substantial rents, that is not always good for residents or the community, but obviously makes a financial pro forma more feasible. And so that's not a surprise. We knew that about our market, and so it's making sure that we're creating the right relationships with the right kinds of developers that can either understand and accept those below market expectations on return, or as we've seen, it creates more of a need for public-private partnerships and for having these tools available. So we obviously leverage all the tools. In some cases, they're on a limited basis locally, but leveraging the tools that we have locally, as well as state and federal resources, to close some of those feasibility gaps. And so the other thing that is important to note with this analysis is that it does obviously take into account the inclusionary zoning, but it's not suggesting that there's a cause that inclusionary zoning causes infeasibility. It obviously doesn't improve a pro forma, but it's important to note that there are the other variables, just as we've seen so often with projects these days, with the increased cost of capital, with the rising interest rate environment, the increased construction costs that are certainly fueling feasibility or infeasibility, and inclusionary zoning is just one of those variables or one of those levers that needs to be taken into account. So as a result, the economic feasibility analysis further concludes that we may need to continue to leverage those incentives, those subsidies, and tools that we have to bridge feasibility gaps and make sure that we're continuing to stimulate housing production. And in review of our application for MBTA communities compliance, it was similar feedback from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities at the state level. They said they encouraged us to continue to keep an eye on the various factors that are affecting feasibility in our market, and to make adjustments if needed on inclusionary zoning or other things that we can do, whether it's zoning related. Obviously, we've talked a lot about zoning and the need to reduce some of the barriers or costs that come from an over-dedication of land for off-street parking, as an example. So they said that it was sufficient, that our application was approved. We have full compliance with MBTA communities law, but they encouraged us to kind of keep an eye on market conditions and feasibility to make sure that we're not having any of those unintended consequences of inhibiting housing production. So that's kind of the high-level summary, and happy to describe any of that in more detail.
Thank you. Mr. Pottle, is there anyone online who would like to speak on item 5C?
Madam Chair, no one is raising their hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on item 5C?
Fred Nathan of Worcester. You can have your unintended consequences. Just remember, I don't know if any of you here read it, in the Sunday paper, they have the listing of properties, sold in Worcester. And very recently, there was a 3-decker, I believe it was Pond Street, that sold for $1 million. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize somebody living on the 3rd floor, who might have been paying $1,500, is now going to be paying $4,000. That's my guess. I don't know the exact numbers, but I mean, this kind of lunacy. And this is all, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again and again and again and again until I go nuts. This is because of all the people who were previously paying crazy money in Boston who decided, hey, I can get a place in Worcester, more room for half the price. So that forced a lot of rents up because of supply and demand. I get it. I think everyone gets it. If they don't get it, it's time they go out and get it, because supply and demand is the structure that compels everyone to charge higher, because they know they can get it, because they're told, well, you don't like it, go next door, see if you can get it. And until they build more housing, and I don't know if you brought this up, Mr. Dunn. I don't know if you guys can answer this. Just curious. Is it a different standing in which, when somebody builds an apartment complex, do they actually get a TIF, or do they get something similar to a TIF? Just curious.
Mr. Dunn, if you could respond to that, that would be helpful.
Sure, through the chair. There is no entitlement to tax relief in the city. So the ability to provide a partial forgiveness of the new taxes for a certain period of time is one of the tools that we have locally. The nomenclature can be confusing sometimes. Historically, the term TIF is used, and that is under state law for commercial projects. And so to create sort of a little bit of a distinction is when you use the same mechanism for a residential project, it's tax increment exemption, a tie agreement, but the mechanics are very the same. So TIF tie, are sometimes used interchangeably. The tie program is under the broader Housing Development Incentive Program of the state, which is predominantly a tool for market rate and mixed income housing. So it can only have up to 20% affordable deed restricted affordable housing in it. As the committee is well aware, as we've been using that tool, we've been negotiating more aggressively with developers to make sure that we're getting that affordability and hopefully not just meeting inclusionary zoning, but exceeding inclusionary zoning and getting closer to that 20% amount that's allowed under the program. Whereas historically, in like the early days of the program, from like 2014 to 2020, I'd say we had a lot of 100% market rate projects that received some tax benefits through that. But it is not an entitlement. Those are always case-by-case, basis that come to this committee and the council for consideration based on the merits of the project, and certainly, as I mentioned, the needs of a project. So, I was just looking at my list. We have, while we want to make sure that we're getting as much affordability as we can, having those mixed income kinds of projects, we have over 1,400 units that have been permitted or proposed in the city that have stalled for economic reasons. So having 1,400 units of potential units sitting on the sideline because their projects are not feasible is not helping either. So it's important that we're using the tools that we have, working with the community and various developers to try to get as many units built, because, as was mentioned, it is largely a supply problem. So the more scarcity we have, the more shortage we have of units, the more folks can charge, because there just isn't that abundance that we need to see, which should keep a check on how rents are becoming more and more unaffordable for folks in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. I think it's helpful for the general public to understand how these TIFs and ties work. So thank you for that explanation. Councilor Toomey, do you have?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do. Actually, I had filed a request for you to look at this when it came out, and we kind of laughed originally. So of course we're gonna fall in and be within the guidelines and everything. But this is an incredible tool that you've put together, and it's being able to look at this, all of this data and all of this information will be able to allow us to pivot if and when necessary, as you said. And I think that one of the things that I worry about a little bit is, do we have a saturation number of when we have too many apartments or places to live, housing?
Through the chair to the councilor, we're definitely not seeing that right now. We're still in a shortage period. I have
Well, I
obviously.
know that, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying, do we have a
Well, yeah.
estimated saturation?
Yeah, so I pay attention because it's interesting. Some communities around the country are seeing, home prices come down. They're seeing rental rates come down. And what's a commonality that I've seen on some of those communities that are seeing that in their markets is that they've had robust housing production over the last several years. So it kind of gives some validation to the whole supply effect argument that the more you build, the more you'll keep a check on that and maybe even see prices and rents come down. But one of the things that we use as a benchmark, as you might know, are some of the demographic projections in Worcester Now Next, as well as the housing production plan. And so the latest out of the housing production plan is estimating we need 8,000 new units by 2034. So we need to produce based on like what we have under construction now in the pipeline. We're not even keeping up with what these analyses are telling us that we need now, let alone where we might get to that kind of point of saturation. So we need to continue to do as much as we can to get as much built as soon as possible.
Well, the other thing is, as we know, what's going on in the country and the world affects all of this. And, I know that when we were trying to do the tiny homes project that was delayed for several years, I don't even know, is it started up again, or?
Through the chair to the councilor, it's unlikely that the Stafford Street project is moving forward due to lack of resources necessary to execute upon that. We do have another proposal for a more manageable tiny home project of 4 units that Worcester Community Housing Resources is trying to execute in partnership with Open Sky right now. So hoping to at least see that demonstrated, because I think just the whole concept is important to see in our market and demonstrate that it can be successful. But I think the proposal that I think you're referring to was down on Stafford Street. That's unlikely to move forward.
Okay. So again, it was materials, and then there was funding and all of those things. So these are we're all fluctuating as the world turns, so to speak. And we know that that's why having this report is a great foundation to be able to measure against all of these things and to be able to move forward. So I want to thank you and your staff for doing an incredible job. It was everything I expected and more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Toomey. Councilor Pasillo?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so my recommendation would be to approve item 5C.
And Madam Chair, I just want to confirm with Mr. Dunn, is this just information on the entry? Can this just be filed, or?
File, I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilors Pasillo,
Yes.
Toomey,
Yes.
and Chairperson Councilor Merrill Carlson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilors Pasillo,
Yes.
Toomey,
Yes.
and Chairperson Councilor Merrill Carlson.
Yes.